Welcome to Extending Grace Podcast. This podcast focuses on spiritual and mental wellness by managing our emotions. We explore emotions, the core reasons, and apply biblical principles to help us cope with these emotions. I am Darlene Amos-McElroy, your host and author of I Ate the Cake, A Journey for Justice, which is a memoir that is the motivation for the podcast. This book can be purchased on Amazon and other major book retailers, and it is also in audiobook form if you choose to do that. If you read the book, please leave a review. Now, Extending Grace Podcast seeks to help us run with endurance, as stated in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Today's podcast is exploring the difference between a grudge and distrust. A teacher told a young student who reported bullying, "I thought you were supposed to be a Christian, but you are holding a grudge." I've been hearing the word grudge a lot recently and has decided to explore this topic. So today's podcast is exploring what is a grudge and what is distrust. And are we confused when we see a person distrust another and assume that it is a grudge? The reason for exploring this topic also is because we sometimes hold ourselves hostage to the past when we don't understand, creating a sense of guilt. Therefore, that guilt is holding us back from running the race of endurance. We can also be manipulated to stay in unhealthy relationships if we don't understand the emotion of distrust, or we don't learn the importance of dismantling a grudge. My goal today is to help you to understand if it's you're holding a grudge or are you simply distrusting someone based off their record of behavior. Now, the Oxford Dictionary meaning of holding a grudge implies a harbored feeling of resentment or ill will that seeks satisfaction from a past injury or insult. The biblical definition of holding a grudge is to grumble or murmur at any person or thing, to entertain an envious or covetous feeling, to do or to give anything unwilling. It also means to hold on to anger, to keep anger. Leviticus 19 and 18 says, "You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." We also see this commandment of loving our neighbors as ourselves throughout the New Testament as well as the Old. And sometimes we are confused about love. But today, we're not going to talk about so much about what love is, but we will get and explore those topics as well. Now, what a grudge is not is when you're wanting fairness or protection from abuse, that is not holding a grudge. Remember, I said that the young student went to report being bullied, and the teacher said to this young child, and I mean elementary child, that you are holding a grudge. I thought you were a Christian. When you want protection or fairness from an abuse, I'm going to say that again. This is not holding a grudge. Remembering what was done to you is not holding a grudge. Remember, the mind was created that we do remember. There are several scriptures that tell us to remember certain things about the Lord our God. So in order for us to remember some things, it has to be created within us to remember. Remembering is not a sin. It is not holding a grudge because you remember what happened to you. Also, expressing the emotion from what was done to you or expressing it is not holding a grudge. Some people may feel like you're talking about it too much, but they have not walked in that path to understand that sometimes traumatic events take a long time to heal, and you expressing it is part of the healing process. Deciding to not reconcile a relationship is not holding a grudge. I'm going to go back to the definition. Taking revenge on someone or having in your heart that, or you're waiting for them to have a downfall, that is holding a grudge. Holding a grudge is unforgiveness. In a previous episode, I said the fact that I don't slap a person who had betrayed me is unforgiveness. And I've heard some people make a comment that that's not unforgiveness. Well, it may not be. It may not be unforgiveness if I decided to not hit back from a fear of being arrested. But in my heart, I desire harm for the other person. It may be forgiveness if I physically harm someone, then I decided to retaliate. So let me backtrack on that. If I was physically harmed and I decided to not retaliate by physically harming another person, that can be forgiveness because I'm making a decision to not retaliate, not from fear, but simply because I don't want to hurt the other person. The body is equipped to respond to danger by God. So it's understandable that you want to react, but the goal is that we lay aside these unhelpful reactions, that we don't have a sin that is constantly in our way from moving forward with God. Now, you certainly don't want to stand and allow someone to physically harm you, which is why the body is equipped to react. For those who are trying to heal from relational abuse, you will be at times conflicted and sometimes criticized when you decide that the relationship is not emotionally safe to maintain. Those who want to see reconciliation will encourage you to return to the relationship, not understanding the gravity of that situation. They may believe that you are holding a grudge and not forgiving. Now, people who hold grudges are silent murderers. They are waiting to destroy what they envy or covet in you. They are waiting on the opportunity to cause harm either emotionally or physically, or they are waiting to see the downfall of whatever it is that you got going on in your life. Someone who's divorced and the person betrayed them by infidelity, they may be waiting for them to have a downfall in that particular marriage. That is unforgiveness. And as an example of holding a grudge is found in 2 Samuel chapter 13 between King David's son Absalom. Absalom's sister Tamar was raped by another one of David's sons, Amnon. Absalom loved his sister and cared for her after she was raped. I encourage you to read second chapter 13. Now, on the surface, you will see that Absalom appeared that he had forgiven his brother. He encouraged his sister in verse 20 to hold her peace and do not take this to heart. For exactly 2 years, he held on, nursed a grudge without appearing to be angry. 2 years. And he planned the death of Amnon. There's a difference between people who hold grudges and people who no longer trust a person. Like Absalom, an unforgiving person is waiting to attack, most often leading the target to believe the relationship is fine. Like Absalom, once the attack is executed, the unforgiving person feels satisfied, large and in charge. They pulled a quick one, so they believe. Like Absalom, the unforgiving person sometimes throws the rock and runs to hide. Unforgiving people are not transparent. That's part of the unforgiveness. They often lack the ability to be transparent, own their mistakes, and make amends. The unforgiving person waits for the perfect time to seek revenge while pretending everything is okay. This is why it is a sin. It leads to being a murderer, silent murderer of people's dreams, silent murderers of people's gifts and talents, killing the relationship slowly. Unforgiveness can be hidden in the actions of insincere kindness. This is why we don't want to take kindness as a sign that someone has forgiven. It is not necessarily so. People can be kind and still hold a grudge against you, just waiting for the opportunity to see you fall. Forgiveness is a heart condition. People can be kind, having kind actions, but evil motives. For 2 years, it appeared that Absalom was not holding a grudge, but he did. He nursed it, and it led to murder. He pretended to be okay. Forgiveness helps us to not allow darkness to rule our hearts and actions. Unfortunately, forgiveness does not take away the pain or the distrust in others. This is why we're talking about what it looks like to hold a grudge and what it looks like to distrust. Some believe that you may not have forgiven a person just because you decided that you could not trust them enough to be in a relationship. When you distrust others, it comes with pain, and pain needs time to heal depending on the level of hurt. Not taking revenge or desiring ill will towards the one who hurt you is forgiveness, but it does not take away the pain or your need to express the pain so that you don't condemn the other person. Someone who no longer trusts may decide not to take a risk on amending the relationship. Trust is the basis of all relationships. In my memoir, I discussed the time I no longer talked to one of my abusers, Tracy. After she committed a crime against me, I couldn't trust her. Talking to her, in my opinion, from my perspective, was a risk in the workplace and a risk emotionally. Her level of deceit was a warning for me. I didn't want anything that I said to be twisted by her, as she was definitely capable of doing. I saw this from her pattern of behavior. Because I chose not to talk to her had nothing to do with unforgiveness, but rather seeing danger and avoiding it. Proverbs 27:13 states, "The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple goes on and suffer for it." When we see a person is not trustworthy based on character and track record, we need to heed the warning. Behavior patterns and character don't change overnight. If a person cannot come to you and admit their wrongdoing, they cannot be trusted. Simply saying, "I'm sorry," but not identifying what was done and the harm it caused created an environment of distrust. Distrust will not allow for a healthy reconciliation. Tracy refused to come to me and deflected by saying she was afraid to come to me. How can you have courage to commit a crime and a sin against another person, but suddenly you become afraid? The fear is admitting and being caught, not an attempt to make amends. Because you may decide that a person is not trustworthy, it does not mean that you harbor unforgiveness. That comes within your heart and knowing whether or not you're letting go, or you don't want any ill will towards that person. Reconciliation is not commanded in the Bible, forgiveness is. Imagine if Absalom or King David forced Tamar to reconcile with Amnon and marry him. Imagine if they had forced Tamar to apologize for Amnon for being beautiful and enticing him to rape her in effort to reconcile the relationship. It's abusive, and God does not condone that we sit at the feet of our abusers. Today, if you have decided to leave a relationship based on a person's character, a poor track record of untrusting behaviors, or a lack of accountability, understand that you are not necessarily walking in unforgiveness. Pray that God help you Pray that God helps your heart to not have ill feelings of resentment towards the person. Pray for healing of your hurt and release of the memory of the hurt. For example, I haven't forgotten the experience of childbirth. I've had 4 children. It was painful, each and every one of them. However, I don't experience that level of pain anymore. I can remember it, but I don't experience that same level of pain today. That's where we want to be when we have been betrayed by others. A place of knowing the pain occurred, but no longer experience the pain in the present. It will take time. Do not allow others to manipulate you to return to relationships that will constantly have you on edge, second guessing everything you do and the things you say. Pray to God for the person's best outcome. When negative feelings emerge, and they will, turn to God. It is okay to remind yourself you are hurt and you're working on the feeling of the pain. It is also okay to remind yourself that you have forgiven when you have no desire to seek revenge or want another's downfall. The wound takes time depending on how deep you were harmed, but God is able to do all things well. Find a place to use the feelings for the good of others. Until next time, stay blessed. Please like, share, or comment this podcast with others. Remember that it takes time for healing, but God is able to do all things well.